The Afterlife, Chapter 1, page 12. Suddenly, my ghost settled back into my body, and for a moment, I felt myself breathe. My legs shuddered and then stilted, and I let out a hiss like the sound of a tire going flat. I had returned to life, and then died a second time. I felt myself, the ghost I mean, again slip away from my bones and drift towards the ceiling. I thought, what's happening? I wanted to hang on to the sink or grip something to keep me at ground level. I wanted to remain next to my body, but I was light now that I had no body for an anchor. I floated towards the rack of fluorescent lights. I drifted through the ceiling, the pink insulation, and the tarred shingles. I found myself on the roof, the air conditioning unit of the nightclub roaring. I rose higher and I thought I was going to pee again when I drifted off the roof and hung in the air. I looked down and spied two dudes sparking up in the parking lot. They were leaning on Uncle Richard's Honda. I wanted to holler, "Get your dirty Nalgas off the car!" But I whispered to myself, "Man, I'm flying." I felt any second that I was going to drop like a sack of cement and burst open. But I flew and fought my instincts to flap my ghostly arms, after all. Isn't that how birds stay in the air? I floated between the nightclub and a boarded-up insurance company. Floated above the parked cars and the dudes and the chicas at the entrance. All of them trying to get in through the double doors smeared with fingerprints of hairspray, cologne, and adolescent sweat. I recognized my primo Eddie, a year older than me at 18, a high school dropout studying air conditioning at the city college. "Primo," I called, but he couldn't hear me. I looked up at the sky. The moon was nearly full and dented as a hubcap. In the distance, sirens of an ambulance fire truck were waiting for me, or at least for that body on the bloody floor of a dirty restroom. The gravity of my new status as a ghost began to sink in as I hovered above the roof. I was amazed by this transformation and by how in my heart I didn't harbor hate for the dude who stuck me. It was weird. He had just taken my life, but I wasn't angry with him. In real life, people would just look at me and I would get mad. But where was my anger now? Maybe in death all that goes. And the fear, too. I wasn't scared at all. I watched the sky until the dark paled and the sun rose pink as a scar. By then, the night winds that flapped the laundry trees had vanished. The chota, the police, had come and gone, along with the ambulance that carried my body to wherever the dead are bathed and tidied up before they're lowered into the ground. My uncle came and picked up his Honda. I saw him hammer the steering wheel with his palm. He buried his face into the steering wheel, sobbing. He drove away, scattering the leaves that had gathered around his tires. The cops returned too. They went inside the club, and a half hour later they came out with the owner, an elderly man with watery eyes named Manuel something or other. He appeared sad and even sadder when he shook the cop's hand. "I'm sorry," I heard the owner mumble. The cops left, taking with them some testimony, but the testimony was with me, not the owner. I was the one killed, and I didn't even feel as bitter as aspirin. It was all weird. My father and mother didn't show up. I knew they were probably crying in the shadows of our house in southeast Fresno, homeland for Mexicans and Hmongs mostly. I pictured my parents. They were in the living room, the television sparkling off their eyeglasses. I pictured my mother turning her head when the telephone rang and rising slowly from the couch with a groan, the crocheted afghan on her lap falling to the floor. She would mutter something about the stupid telephone ringing just as the program was getting good and scold her viejo, her old man, my father, for not answering it. Her face would become a mess of lines and her mouth would tighten into a bud, then loosen as the voice on the other end told her that I had been killed. I pictured her dropping the phone and bringing a knuckle to her mouth, Then my father, heavy as cement, having inhaled so much of it, would return his camel large head. He would rise from the recliner to pick up the telephone and scream over the noise of the television. Cuomo! Still, I was surprised they didn't come at least to circle the place where I had died. Everybody panicked when the cops first came. They had their nightsticks drawn and bullied their way into the dance hall. The police had shoved a couple of dudes against the wall and arrested one wobbly-legged scarecrow when he couldn't manage to swallow a storm cloud of marijuana. The cloud floated from his mouth, and high on Mota, he had just been pushed into a cruiser in the parking lot. This is a trip, I said to myself and screamed it from the roof. People were passing below, but they couldn't hear me. I screamed my name, and no one, not even a stray dog that was kicking down the street, could hear me. I was learning about my new self. I could see the outline of myself, which was sort of like a figure penciled in and then erased on paper. I was vaguely visible to myself, but invisible to others. 2 workers on the roof on the next building were doing something to the gutters. I waved my arms, and they couldn't see me. They kept jamming a garden hose down one of the gutters, and they started to blast away the leaves and crap. It's a trip, I formed the words of my lips. I'm a ghost! My wounds were closed, my juicy fruit gum still in my pocket. Then a horn blasted, and I jumped, scared, and drifted off the roof like a balloon, slowly descending to the street. I touched down on the sidewalk, amazed there was nothing to it. Just float off a building, land softly. Ever since I was a little dude out of my diapers, I had dreamed of flying. And I guess now that dream was coming true. Plus, I was invisible. A man tripping down the street couldn't see me. He was shoving a $20 bill into his wallet. He walked past me and hissed playfully at a stray cat hugging the dried bushes of that closed-down insurance company. The cat was carrying something gray in its mouth. A mouse? A pigeon that wasn't quick enough? Dead, with my eyes wide open, I began a new life without a body. I had nothing to fear. Downtown Fresno, I floated into the long rug right through a plate of glass, and I positioned myself over the head of the cashier, her eyes narrow as hatchets, as she announced over the intercom, Raphael, code 14, aisle 6. I knew the meaning of the code. A shoplifter was sliding something under his jacket. I glanced up at the sign posted above aisle 6, shampoo and hair care products. My bad. A teenage girl out to improve her looks was snagging one thing or another. I would have kicked down the aisle except I confronted my Uncle Richard and my cousin Eddie. Richard was cradling flowers in his arms, and Eddie had large bags of potato chips under his arms as if they were pillows. Their steps were slow, as if they were wading in water. Their eyes were puffy, their faces dark from not shaving. Pio, I called out. I pointed a finger at my chest. Primo, it's me. They couldn't hear me. They passed through my outstretched arms and headed to the cashier, whose hatchet eyes had become sharper. I had never seen Uncle Richard with flowers before, but then again, I'd never seen him cry before like he did early this morning in his Honda. They were going to visit my parents, I realized, and they believed it was smart of them to bring something sweet-smelling to my mom. And potato chips, snacks for the ride over. At my parents, there would be others to lament my death at such a young age. Angel, mi carnal, would be there, with the cement bags of guilt on his shoulders. I should have been with him, he would argue with himself. We could have took the dude. He would be alive. He would cry, and I would cry in return. Charlie, we'd both be dead. In 3 fights that I'd seen Angel in, he had lost them all. He was just a chubby, peace-loving dude. I stood between Richard and Eddie. Richard said, I feel weird, and he rubbed his arm with his free hand. Right then, I understood my power. I was dead, but I could offer a chill as cold as ice. Eddie looked toward the ceiling. It's the air conditioning. It's set too cold. They bought their goodies and were out the door, just as the cashier cried into the intercom, Raphael, cord 14, aisles 7, 9, and 14. Incredible, I thought. People lifting the whole store.